Thank you, Mr. Ingram. Can I ask you just to turn up your mic when you're not speaking? Thank you. Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. Obviously, you mentioned Romsey Road in the report. Do we kind of have any idea yet of what the cause for that is and what a potential solution might be? I'm guessing it's mostly something to do with traffic and congestion, but is there anything that we can kind of, in the short term, might be able to assist that work?
Yeah, so it's primarily traffic related. It's in part because it's on a hill, so some of the sort of impediments to the smooth flow of traffic leaving Winchester are the roundabout further up the hill, and obviously when traffic's very heavy, that backs up really quickly. Although it's much further up Romsey Road, you've got the staggered traffic lights around King's School, that still has a backing up impact further down the road. It doesn't take long when everybody's leaving the city at a similar time for these to have sort of incremental impacts. So the sort of the queuing of traffic can have an impact. But there is some suggestion that it's also partly due to bus routes going up and down that particular route as well. So even though we've got Euro 6 buses for park and ride, there are a lot of other buses that use that particular network that are not Euro 6, so that can have a negative impact as well. But I might also just ask Phil, as he's waited so patiently, because he's a lot closer to this particular issue than myself.
Phil, you're on again.
Thank you, Chair. Not really got a lot to answer. As in what the solution is, yes, it's probably traffic related. The other issue is not just the level of pollution. It's actually the proximity of the receptor. So when we're looking at failures, what we're talking about is a concentration at a location where somebody's exposed. So Romsey Road is also an issue at the bottom where you've got that row of terraced houses. So they are also quite close to the pollution. So it's not just the level of pollution, it's the fact that the houses are closer to the road, so they experience heavy pollution. I don't have an answer to that. We can't move the houses. So really all we can do is reduce the pollution levels. Dave has identified the sorts of things we might need to look at. This will be part of what I asked the consultants who successfully tender for the closing of the tender document. Actually, is this Friday, so we'll be looking at those next week, and that will be part and parcel we asked to look at as ideas of how we go forward. So without pre-guessing that, we'll come back to you with that and see what they say as well.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Toothridge. Councillor Pearson, did you have any questions? No, you're fine.
No, I'm very familiar with what Dave's presented.
Thank you. Thank you. Do we have anyone next? Councillor Crossan.
As you alluded to at the beginning, David, you said that some people here have been involved in this for years, and there's some like me who are quite new to this game. So I have a kind of beginner's question, which is, how much are we spending on this every year in terms of operational costs to maintain the air quality management process? I'm not suggesting it's not worthwhile. I just want to get my head around roughly how much it is. And am I right? I think my assumption is that because of the nature of the last couple of years, it would be way too premature to declare victory based on the data, because there's been so much change because of COVID. Thank you.
So in terms of officer resourcing, there's two officers, and you're looking at one of them, and Mr. Toothridge fills the other one. We are not specialists in air quality. This is just one of a number of work programs that we deliver on, but I can't give you an absolute figure on our time because we don't keep that kind of information. But it just gives you some idea. And then aside from that, there are the deployment costs for the diffusion tube. So there are, as I say, there's 28 in the city and there's a further 8 in the district. They all have to be changed every month. So it's basically an officer, it's an officer day a month to do that. And the third element of cost is the purchasing of the hardware. So you've got the one-off costs, as Mr. Tidridge mentioned earlier. You've got the nitrogen dioxide analyzers. We have 2 of those. They come in about £10,000 or £12,000, and they have a lifetime of, again, I'm going to ask Bill to sort of correct me if I've got anything wrong after I've finished, but I would say 6 or 7 years tops, and then they start to break a lot. And then you've got the annual maintenance contracts as well, because that's obviously very specialist work. We can't do that. So we have specialist contractors that come in and service those bits of equipment, for which we have a budget of around £25,000 a year. But obviously, like any program of work, you have to buy new bits of equipment occasionally, so there's spikes in cost. But as I said in my presentation, we bought a FIDAS 200 monitor to start to commence monitoring for PM 2.5s, and that came in at £27,000. So yeah, and then after that, you're looking at about 4 or 5. Phil, I'm going to ask you to come in. Have I got this ballpark right?
Mr. Tidridge?
Dave, I couldn't disagree with anything you've said there. That sounds fairly reliable costings. I do hope the NOx analyzers last a little longer than 6 years. We try and get them to run for 10 years, but you are right. They start costing more after about 5 years because bits start breaking, a bit like any piece of equipment. So they do start to cost more, but we capitalise them over 10 years. But I think the costs you reference are pretty reasonable. And when we compare to other local authorities where they have dedicated air quality staff, I think we do a damn good job with the staff we've got, quite frankly.
Thank you, Mr. Tidridge. I think we would agree, and we wouldn't dare not to, with Mr. Ingram in the room. If I may, Mr. Ingram, I'd like to ask you a question. Some people may wonder why we're even considering reducing the air quality management area, given that it's likely that more stringent targets or more stringent requirements will be brought in, particularly with the WHO guidelines and the Environment Act. But I believe it's a statutory thing that we have to do. Perhaps you could clarify that for us. Thank you.
Yes, so we are legally required to review and update our air quality management or action plan every 5 years. So that, as I say, that's due this year. And as part of that piece of work, we have to look at the data. And obviously, data is data. It tells you, gives you a picture of air quality in this instance. And the indications are that broadly within the Scottish FIDA, we are broadly complying with current national air quality standards for nitrogen, annual mean for nitrogen dioxide. And that's what our air quality management area is primarily based on at this point in time. It's nitrogen dioxide levels. And as I mentioned earlier, those levels are not currently looking like they're going to be amended in any way by the Environment Act. That's not going to be the case for particulate, so it might well be that we have to look at the Winchester area again, depending on what comes out of those new particulate standards that the government has been challenged with delivering by October of this year. So that would be one of the questions we will be engaging with the consultants in view of the impending or imminent changes that we expect by the end of this year. Is it too premature to be undeclaring on the majority of the air quality management area as it currently stands?
Thank you. I thought that was definitely worth clarifying. We are now at 10:20. We've been going almost for 4 hours. Are there any more questions, or will we go into debate on this paper? Okay. Does anybody have any debate? Councillor Pearson.
Just very briefly, picking up what David said, the difficulty of recording 2.5s. The issue is not just what we're producing; we're getting inverted commas dirty air coming from Europe, depending on the climate conditions. We have Saharan dust coming, anti-cyclone conditions. Ozone complicates the issue, And of course, we're concentrating on vehicles, and we're ignoring any dirty air that's coming from the housing, which we're not looking at. So it's incredibly, how on earth you separate out Saharan dust, for example, from what a vehicle may produce, when you're just looking at the raw data, you just can't do it. At least I'm not aware you can do it. So I understand fully the difficulty that Phil has, because he's the guy who deals with figures, and Debbie, I think, has got to listen and nod 3 times, isn't it?
Thank you very much, Councillor Pearson. If we're done, I'm just okay, Councillor Twickenham.
Just a very quick comment, and let's say I do agree with Mr. Tildridge. It does appear, based on the quality of this paper, that we do have a very good air quality team. So just to commend you both on an excellent paper. And so really do look forward to that report coming back from the experts when they get it, because I do think as a district and a city, we want to be UK leaders at this and get as close to those WHO targets as possible.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. So thank you very much, Mr. Ingram, and thank you, Councillor Williams. I won't call on you to speak because I can imagine you'd much rather be tucked up in bed given how you're feeling. So I think we've sort of given you quite a lot of comments on this. There's a lot of support. I'm really delighted to see that the consultants that are being engaged are not just looking at the current air quality management area, but they're looking at if we were to do more, because we do have ambitions to do more, what that would mean to both the air quality management area, but also in terms of an air quality action plan. I note in the paper that you say that plan will go to Cabinet. Obviously, in this committee, we are very interested in air quality. If we can have sight of that air quality action plan and the results of that consultancy work in due course at an appropriate meeting, then we would welcome that. But thank you very much for your time. Not only are you obviously a great team, I think Mr. Chittridge is looking for a raise, Councillor Cutler. Right, so thank you everyone. We have one more item, and that is simply to note the work plan going forward. Item 11. So in our next meeting, we won't be looking at the air quality management area annual update because we've done that today. We will be looking at the carbon neutrality programme, housing, property policies, which I'm really looking forward to. We'll be looking at carbon offsetting. We've been promised that for some time. Movement strategy, emerging action, and also reviewing sport and leisure provision in theory. Well, I'd like to thank everybody for their really helpful comments, for the sort of the detailed analysis of the papers, for the value that I think we've added as a committee tonight. And thank you to everyone who's managed to stand and listen. Thank you to Councillor Williams, the Cabinet Member for the Climate Emergency, for being here, even though she's feeling very unwell, and to Simon Finch, Mr. Tittridge, who is still here, and thank you, David. Good night, everybody. We're done. Oh, and thank you, Mrs. McKenna and AD as well. Thank you. I thanked everybody. I think so. Good night.